so Emerson and Thoreau um, inherit the legacy of, Protestantism, um, the cult. They come draw on the same culture that uh, motivated the colonization of the U.S. The same kind of uh, spirit of, Protestant work ethic, the spirit of adventured self-discovery, prioritizing the individual. Um, Emerson and Thoreau represent a kind of secularization of these Protestant Puritan colonial pioneer values and ambitions, like the Puritans and the colonists. They look to the landscape, the empty landscape, or the apparent, blank canvas, was a fantasy for them of self-realization, proving oneself in the eyes of God. So I think that ambition to prove yourself is, as an individual, and to use nature, to do it on the land somehow, to prove oneself in the arena of nature, to make one's mark upon the land. That goes pretty deep in our culture. So I'm going to look at several of the points that Emerson and Thoreau make in their best-known works, the essay Self-Reliance and Thoreau's book Walden. Arguments against conformism and for adventure. What is it? Emerson writes that society is a joint stock company in which the members agree for the better securing of his bread for each shareholder to surrender the liberty and culture of the eater. So he's making a metaphor for society, which he's saying social value is like the stock value of a company. He's saying society agrees to define value in a certain way so that we can secure it for each. We can reassure each other of our value, although it's actually not rewarding. It's an illusion of value. I mean, so this is a mixed metaphor. He's saying on the one hand that social value is like stocks, but then he's saying it's also like bread, and we agree on sharing a certain kind of value because we can reassure each other of it. I mean, I think it's another, metaphor would just be money. Or I think that's what he's literally talking about is money. And social prestige. We define social value in terms that we can be very confident of holding, of owning. We make it very quantifiable. I think that quantifiability, the fact that social prestige really is quantifiable. It's pretty much reducible to money, isn't it? I mean, I think in a sense that's what these adventure narratives are testing a little bit, is whether the qualitative, something about pursuit of qualitative value, um, is worth sacrificing quantitative value. Um, Whether we, you know, quantify value in terms of money or years of life, quantity of life. Um, uh, um, it it seems to me that part of what's at stake. I mean, and it also makes the comparison to like internet, Instagram, social media, and so on, interesting because those are quantified. The value of those is quantified in terms of likes and shares. Um, so, um, but the fact that we um, keep searching, like, um, for exceptional experience, that we're so obsessed with it, even if as we're always wanting to quantify it and measure its value in normative, not um, uh, exceptional ways. Um, uh, and like, so we think of Cheryl Strayed as a best-selling author. Her success has to do not with telling her story alone, but becoming a big successful author. um, and I um, So I guess I'm trying to understand the um, to make some logical sense of motivation like Chris McCandless's to uh, divorce with society as thoroughly as possible. Is to find some real bread, some and the real bread, real value that you can eat, that actually matters to you, um, in a true way, um, not just because I can pretend that I own it and it's secure. um, that entails some risk. Then that, according to Emerson, that's just what we're afraid of. We're afraid of truth, fortune, um, that um, testing our luck, um, seeing how things play out. That idea that life is what happens in the present, and the present is equally being given to you as it's something that happens to you as much as you act within the moment. The moment has you as much as you have it. Um, so that's uncertain. That's not something you can pretend to control. Um, the actual unfolding of life. So I feel like Emerson's making a valid point here about how we resist the battle of fortune, the battle of fate, the unpredictability of actual living, um, by our um, devotion to these secure measures, quantifiable measures of social value. Um, I think this is what Thoreau is describing in this passage. I went to the woods because I wished to live deliberately, to front only the essential facts of life, and see if I could not learn what it had to teach. And not when I came to die, I discovered that I had not lived. It's an interesting question. Like, live. how is it? What does he mean? I had not lived. I mean, he obviously he lived, but there are two different senses of living, and to live as just merely survive, versus to live in an emphatic sense. Um, it's interesting. He's suggesting the truth of life, true living, is not reducible to mere living. So, it, do you believe that? Is that, and if so, how do you define that difference? So, for Thoreau and Emerson, it has crucially to do with this experience of fate, like letting life happen to you in unpredictable ways, rather than trying to secure your bread in pre-packaged, conformist, quantifiable terms. I do not wish to live what was not life. Living is so dear. Nor did I wish to practice resignation unless it was quite necessary. I wanted to live deep and suck out all the marrow of life, to live so sturdily and Spartan-like as to put to rout all that was not life, to cut a broad swath and shave close, to drive life into a corner and reduce it to its lowest terms. And if it proved to be mean, why then to get the whole and genuine meanness of it and publish its meanness to the world. Or if it were sublime, to know it by experience and be able to give a true account of it in my next excursion. For most men, it appears to me, are in a strange uncertainty about it, whether it's the devil or of God, and have somewhat hastily concluded that it is the chief end of man here to glorify God and enjoy him forever. So I think that what he is criticizing here is not God or the devil, but this over hasty assumption to know what the God and or devil are about, rather than experiencing it firsthand. So that experimental attitude, that need to kind of test oneself against a wider world, it doesn't seem necessarily to have to do with nature, but it has to do with cutting out the crap, that joint stock agreement of, on quantified value or prestige or money, and facing the world honestly means facing its unpredictability. Here's the way Matthew McConaughey puts it in the movie Dazed and Confused. He's talking about this agreement that his friend has to sign to play football in order to play football at high school the next year.
Alcohol, drugs, sex after 12, or any other illegal activity.
God, my shadow.
Later, baby, man. Found that in your glove compartment, man.
Hey, you know you're the third person who's given me this today? God.
Well, what do you reckon you're gonna do?
I don't know, man. I'll probably end up signing it. I just don't want to give in so easy.
Man, it's the same bullshit they tried to pull in my day. You know, if it ain't that piece of paper, some other choice they're gonna try and make for you. You gotta do what Randall Pink Floyd wants to do, man. Let me tell you this. The older you do get, the more rules are gonna try to get you to follow. You just gotta keep living, man. LIVIN.
Man, if you're gonna sign that paper, man, you should throw a little grass right in the middle, man. Roll it up, sign the joint, man. That's gonna tell him something.
That's what I'll do.
That's funny, but I wonder if there's a kernel of interesting response to that question of like what the difference between true living and mere living is a kind of emphatic um, uh, project, LIVIN as a, you know, poeticizing language, making jokes or whatever, figuring the terms of life as a way of gesturing at a dream, at a investment in purpose, without reducing it to something quantifiable. This critique of conformism and prepackaged quantifiable social value is pretty radical. He, in fact, um, says not just that we're afraid, as Emerson does, but that we're miserable. We lead lives of quiet desperation. Our longing for security is so great that we're willing to be miserable for the sake of being secure. We're more scared of uncertainty and unpredictability than we are misery. That's pretty sad. Like we prefer the security, predictability of misery. We prefer predictable misery than unpredictable. And trying to be happy. That's pretty sad. But I get what he's saying. I mean, I do. I think unpredictability is very scary in a real way. So it's not something to be dismissed. Um, but it does seem like a kind of a logical contradiction to choose defeat over even trying. Like I prefer to be miserable to the uncertainty of trying not to be miserable. I mean, that just seems morbid. It seems it's. I think the critique here of conformism as a kind of social illness. It makes sense in that way. But Thoreau takes it to a very radical extreme, as we've already seen. But not only does he suggest that we choose misery for the sake of security, but this makes Thoreau reject even compassion, even sympathy. He sees as implicitly conformist, means of control and morbid. So luxuries, the comforts of life are actually hindrances because they preempt your personal discovery of desire or what you want. They tell you what you want rather than giving you an opportunity to discover it. And then he says, if I knew for a certainty that a man was coming to my house with the conscious design of doing me good, I should run for my life. I think that's a very American sentiment. So what's the logic of it? I think it's that same thing that not wanting others to impose upon me what I need, to tell me what I need. Someone else's pity gets in the way of my discovery for myself, what I want, what I need. I think that's, I think there's something to consider there. I don't think this statement is the same as the statement you should not feel compassion. I think he's rejecting more the patronizing compassion that tells you what your own good is. But that, again, that's a blurry line between the two. But I think that critique of pity is certainly a key contention of Thoreau's and Emerson's. So maybe we can get a better sense of it when we look at the positive side of their argument. So we've looked at against conformism. So what do they have to say for adventure? What's the rationale for that? So again, this idea of life only avails not having lived. So that seems like another, he's insisting on life as an active event rather than something quantified that you hold in the bank. Having lived, I've acquired these experiences. Power ceases in the instant of repose. It resides in the moment of transition from a past to a new state. And I really like that. Life is always, it's always in motion. It's always going somewhere. That, that gets back to that left-right brain, Alison Gopnik's two kinds of intelligence. Our left brain analytical thought wants to fix things, hold them steady so we can analyze them and manipulate them, as we're so good at doing. But maybe we're so good at doing that, at fixing things and breaking them down analytically, that it's led us to forget the kind of the actual flow of life, that the actual experience of life is this experience of perpetual movement that in the end can't be quantified, that that quantification and analysis, they're really handy tools, but again, that idea of Ian McGilchrist, they're there to serve a master purpose that can't be instrumentalized. This moment of transition to a new state, the shooting of the gulf, darting to an aim. All these metaphors of jumping. This one fact the world hates, that the soul becomes, for that forever degrades the past, turns all riches to poverty. So again, that metaphor of money. You can't hold yourself in the bank, your memory bank, and that's something like social media kind of does. Is it accumulates yourself in all these images and documentation, all this documentation of yourself. Whereas he's saying who you are, what life is essentially this transitory, is essentially transitory and cannot be fixed. So inasmuch, okay, this one fact the world hates, that the soul becomes, for that forever degrades the past. Inasmuch as the soul is present, there will be power not confident, but agent. So he's actually contrasting confidence with agency. So agency depends on risk, a lack of confidence. Emerson takes this contrast between confidence and agency even further to um, um, prioritize chance over even his own will. My willful actions and acquisitions are but roving. If I intend it, um, that means it's already kind of prepackaged and commodified and secondhand. That what's true is really what happens to me inadvertently. My idlest reverie, the faintest native emotion, command my curiosity and respect. So he's really elevating chance even over his, not just over his control, but over his will, his intention. So he likens himself to jumping, but and I think even more so to the child. The child's overwhelming curiosity for falsification, wanting to see how the world can be otherwise than the child understands. This is the highest agency. This is what true power is like in the world. That's an interesting point. The child cumbers himself never about consequences, about interests. He gives an independent, genuine verdict. You must court him. He does not court you. But the man is, as it were, clapped into jail by his consciousness. You must court him. What's the authority of the child that Emerson is referring to there? That makes him, allows the child to give an independent, genuine verdict. So he continues, the power which resides in him is new in nature, and none but he knows what that is which he can do, nor does he know until he has tried. Again, like you learn what you're doing from doing it. Not for nothing, one face, one character, one fact makes much impression on him, and another none. So he's talking about a kind of fatalism. What happens, there's always a significance behind what seems like the accidents that happen. The eye was placed where one ray should fall, that it might testify of that particular ray. Great men have always done so and confided themselves childlike to the genius of their age. I think that's just the other side of curiosity and wanting to learn from, having your expectations overturned. It makes you it makes accidents count in a crucial way. Because each accident is a revelation of a different perspective. I think this is what Thoreau's getting at as well. And he talks about life in terms of an experiment. Here is life, an experiment to a great extent untried by me, but it does not avail me that they have tried it. Man's capacities have never been measured, nor are we to judge of what he can do by any precedent, so little has been tried. Whatever have been thy failures hitherto, be not afflicted, my child, for who shall assign to thee what thou hast left undone? I think this also informs this next line. You can't kill time without injuring eternity. This having a sense for the unlimited uh, potential of the future. I think this is a really key idea because I think it um, affects that question. I think it pertains to that question of exploiting the land, wasting the land, failing to respect the land and nature and life. Um, because it um, recognizing that we can't know what have yet to discover, it means that we can't quantify, um, eh, we can't identify or delimit exactly where our adventures or our life experiences are going to come from. Um, I think there's something about this that resists the reduction of nature to like a resource, to something that you can own. Um, I think insisting on this principle that life is an open and ongoing experiment, the purpose of which is as yet unknown, um, that's humbling because it makes eh, the world, it makes life a place to learn about what living is for. Um, so I think that inherently, that's an inherently humble attitude. Like if you have that attitude, the contrast is, if you know what life is for, that's what allows or rationalizes, exploiting nature. Um, so that sort of um, dogmatism, or at least assurance of what life is for, um, and what should be protected, what um, should be exploited, and um, so on. That seems like the rather arrogant and potentially damaging attitude. Um, so I think um, one way of looking at this emphasis on the childlike whim and curiosity and uh, paying attention to the moment, the accident, um, is there's something very resourceful about that in terms of value. It's open to discovering new values rather than just always trying to exploit or maximize, the values that we have. Um, I think it approaches the world as abundant, like that it has more to offer than what we know. Um, and uh, Whereas I think the tendency to approach the world in terms of scarcity. I mean, that's that joint stock company that Emerson was talking about. There are only certain values, certain things of value, and we need to secure them for ourselves. That sort of implies that that resources are limited, um, and we secure them by keeping them away from others. It's sort of this, economy of scarcity and private property. Um, so again, that seems more arrogant and damaging, disrespectful of the world insofar as it's turning the world, the outside world, into a resource for my exploitation. Is turning other people, it's turning society into a zero-sum game where my benefit has to come at someone else's loss. Um, so here's a little longer, but I think my favorite passage in Walden. It kind of combines, I think, a lot of the themes that we've been talking about. But what I like about it is how it celebrates the unpredictable and surprising sources of value. The value is about discovering ever new kinds of value, rather than settling on any one, or just trying to maximize any one kind of value. If one listens to the faintest but constant suggestions of his genius, which are certainly true, he sees not to what extremes nor even insanity it may lead him. And yet that way, as he grows more resolute and faithful, his road lies. So he's taking on board that mental illness. So this is just another way of saying I'm not going to limit my sense of genius with my sense of rationality. I'm holding in earnest to my willingness to be surprised. The faintest assured objection which one healthy man feels will at length prevail over the arguments and customs of mankind. No man ever followed his genius until it misled him. So that idea of experiment, you have to be taught by life, rather than just testing your ideas against life. You have to be schooled by life. You have to, be misled by your genius and have life correct you. The greatest gains and values are farthest from being appreciated. So again, that what is appreciated is already secure. And that's what's necessarily misleading about it. What's of value is the process of discovery. We easily come to doubt if they exist. We soon forget them. They are the highest reality. Perhaps the facts most astounding and most real are never communicated by man to man. So, he's effectively saying the best we can communicate to each other is, that we don't know, that, not what matters can't be reduced to facts. This romantic, or, you could also say Christian idea that with the best we can communicate is a sort of grace, a graceful ignorance, a graceful openness, or resignation, or faith, in resignation to or faith in the world, the experience of life. I think that's humble. I think that's what respecting life sounds like to me. Is the attitude that it is going to show me what it has to show me, rather than assuming that I know going in, and I'm gonna impose that or use life to maximize that. So the true harvest of my daily life is somewhat as intangible and indescribable as the tints of morning or evening. So again, he's using metaphor here. The tints of morning or evening is like a simile or metaphor for value. The way in which we experience value is like an environmental event. You can't really hold it steady. It's a vision of beauty that comes and goes fleetingly. It's a little stardust caught, a segment of the rainbow which I have clutched. If you have built castles in the air, your work need not be lost. That is where they should be. Now put foundations under them. So that's really lovely, I think, the way he characterizes life, the building of foundations for dreams. Life isn't about realizing or, capturing your dreams in reality, but perpetually putting foundations under them, keeping the experience of dreaming, the possibility of these surprising tints of morning and evening. Keeping, imagining ever new possibilities for that to happen, rather than capturing it and kind of standardizing it and making it an end-all be-all that is deadening to the actual, lived experience of life. That, so that, again, that thing that's perpetually ongoing.